In the grand halls of Buckingham Palace, where centuries of tradition echo through marble corridors, where protocol dictates every gesture and centuries-old etiquette governs every public appearance, a small boy with tousled hair and an infectious grin was about to turn the most solemn royal ceremony into an unforgettable spectacle. This wasn't just any child. This was Prince Louis, the youngest son of the Prince and Princess of Wales, and he was about to prove that sometimes the most genuine moments of joy come from the most unexpected places. What happened on that Buckingham Palace balcony during the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebrations would become one of the most talked about royal moments in decades. But this story isn't just about a child's playful antics. It's about how authenticity, innocence, and pure joy can capture the hearts of millions, reminding us all that behind the crowns and ceremony, the royal family are human beings with the same challenges, delights, and unpredictable moments that every family experiences. From a moment Prince Louis Arthur Charles was born on April 23, 2018, he seemed destined to bring a different energy to the House of Windsor. But nobody could have predicted that this little prince would become the star of one of Britain's most significant royal celebrations, not through perfectly executed protocol, but through the kind of spontaneous, heartwarming behavior that would make grandparents everywhere smile and nod in recognition. This is the story of how a 4-year-old boy with a love for drumming motions and an inability to sit still became an internet sensation, captured the attention of world media, and reminded an entire nation why the monarchy, at its heart, is about family, tradition, and the passing of joy from one generation to the next. The morning of June 2nd, 2022, dawned bright and clear over London, perfect weather for what would become one of the most memorable days in recent royal history. Inside Kensington Palace, the Wales family was preparing for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebrations, marking an unprecedented 70 years of service to the Commonwealth realms. For Prince William and Catherine, this day represented not just a celebration of his grandmother's remarkable reign, but also an opportunity to introduce their youngest children to one of the most significant royal traditions, the Buckingham Palace balcony appearance. Prince Louis Arthur Charles, at 4 years and 1 month old, was experiencing his second major balcony appearance. His first had been during the Queen's official birthday celebrations just days earlier, but that had been merely a warm-up for what was to come. The little prince had already shown signs of his spirited personality during previous public appearances, but nothing had quite prepared the royal household for what would unfold on this particular Thursday afternoon. The palace staff had spent months planning every detail of the Jubilee celebrations, from the precise timing of the RAF flyover to the exact positioning of each royal family member on the iconic balcony. Everything was choreographed to perfection. The balcony appearance, a tradition dating back over a century, had always been a moment of dignified celebration, where the royal family would wave graciously to the crowds gathered below in the mall. It was a solemn yet joyous occasion, steeped in protocol and executed with military precision. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, had spent considerable time preparing her children for their public duties. Prince George, at 8 years old, had already begun to understand the weight of his future responsibilities and generally conducted himself with remarkable composure for someone so young. Princess Charlotte, at 7, had shown herself to be naturally graceful and aware of the cameras, often seen gently correcting her younger brother's behavior with a wisdom that seemed to come naturally to her. But Prince Louis presented a different challenge altogether. At 4, he was at that wonderful and unpredictable age where curiosity trumped protocol, where the need to move and explore often overcame instructions to stand still and wave. Catherine and William had discussed extensively how to manage their youngest son's energy during the lengthy public appearances that would mark the Jubilee weekend. They understood that asking a 4-year-old to stand quietly for extended periods while thousands of people cheered and military bands played was perhaps asking the impossible. The morning preparations at Kensington Palace revealed the careful thought that had gone into every aspect of the children's participation. Catherine had chosen their outfits with her usual impeccable taste, selecting clothing that was both appropriate for the formal occasion and comfortable enough for the children to move naturally. Prince Louis wore a smart sailor suit, a nod to royal tradition that had been updated for comfort and practicality. The outfit was specially tailored to allow for the kind of movement that an active 4-year-old might require, though nobody could have anticipated just how much movement that would entail. The journey from Kensington Palace to Buckingham Palace that morning was filled with the kind of excitement that only royal occasions can generate. London streets were already lined with well-wishers, many of whom had been camping out for days to secure the best viewing positions. Union Jack flags fluttered from every available flagpole, and the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. For Prince Louis, peering out of the car windows at the crowds and decorations, this was better than any theme park adventure. Inside Buckingham Palace, the extended royal family was gathering for what many recognized might be one of the last great balcony appearances featuring the Queen front and center. At 96, Her Majesty had been experiencing some mobility issues, but her determination to participate fully in her Platinum Jubilee celebrations was unwavering. The sight of 4 generations of the royal family preparing to step onto that famous balcony carried particular significance, representing not just the past 70 years of the Queen's reign, but also the future of the monarchy. Prince Louis's energy was already apparent as the family gathered in the palace's inner chambers. While the adults discussed the timing and logistics of the appearance, the young prince was far more interested in exploring the ornate rooms, examining the portraits of long-dead monarchs, and asking endless questions about everything he could see. His natural curiosity and boundless energy were endearing to the palace staff, who had grown accustomed to his animated presence during previous visits. The relationship between Prince Louis and his great-grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, was particularly special. Despite the significant age gap, the Queen had always shown a particular fondness for her great-grandchildren, and Prince Louis's uninhibited personality seemed to bring out a more relaxed side of the monarch. Palace insiders often spoke of how the Queen's eyes would light up when her youngest great-grandson entered a room, his infectious energy seeming to energize everyone around him. As the time approached for the balcony appearance, the family received their final briefings on protocol and positioning. The children had been through this routine before, but Prince Louis's attention span meant that instructions needed to be repeated and simplified. William and Catherine had developed strategies for managing their son's energy during public appearances, including subtle redirections and the promise of treats afterward, but they also recognized that some degree of unpredictability was simply part of having a 4-year-old in such formal settings. The build-up to the balcony moment was intense. Outside, the mall was packed with hundreds of thousands of Jubilee celebrants, their voices creating a constant hum of excitement that could be heard even through the thick palace walls. Television crews from around the world had positioned themselves for the perfect shot of the royal family, and millions of viewers were preparing to watch the ceremony from their homes. The pressure to execute a flawless appearance was immense, but it was precisely this pressure that would make Prince Louis's upcoming performance so memorable and endearing. Behind the scenes, palace staff were making final preparations for the RAF flyover that would mark the climax of the balcony appearance. The timing had to be perfect, with the royal family positioned and ready at exactly the right moment for the aircraft to pass overhead. This coordination required split-second timing and absolute precision, factors that don't typically align well with the presence of a spirited 4-year-old. As the massive doors leading to the balcony prepared to open, Prince Louis bounced on his toes with barely contained excitement. He had been told about the planes that would fly overhead, about the crowds of people who would cheer when they appeared, and about how important it was to wave and smile. What he hadn't been prepared for was how all of these elements would combine to create a moment of such overwhelming stimulation that his natural response would be to express his joy in the most authentic way possible, through movement, through play, and through the kind of uninhibited celebration that only a child can provide. The stage was set for what would become one of the most memorable royal moments of the 21st century. As the doors opened and the family prepared to step out onto the balcony, Prince Louis was about to transform a solemn state occasion into a celebration of pure, infectious joy that would captivate audiences around the world and remind everyone watching why spontaneous moments of happiness are often more powerful than even the most carefully orchestrated ceremony. The moment the French doors opened onto the Buckingham Palace balcony, Prince Louis stepped into what would become his defining moment in royal history. The roar from the crowd below was deafening, hundreds of thousands of voices cheering in unison, a wall of sound that seemed to shake the very foundations of the palace. For most 4-year-olds, such overwhelming stimulation might have resulted in tears or retreat, but Prince Louis responded with pure, unbridled excitement. The family took their positions along the red-carpeted balcony with practiced precision. Queen Elizabeth II, despite her advanced age and recent health concerns, stood regally at the center, her presence commanding even in the midst of such celebration. Prince Charles, now King Charles III, stood beside his mother, with Camilla at his side. Prince William and Catherine took their positions with their children, while other senior royals filled out the formation that would be captured in photographs destined for history books. Prince Louis found himself positioned between his siblings Princess Charlotte and Prince George, both of whom had already mastered the art of royal waving. That particular gesture that manages to be both gracious and restrained, acknowledging the crowd while maintaining appropriate dignity. But as the family settled into position and began their synchronized waving, Prince Louis was absorbing the scene around him with a wide-eyed wonder that only a child possesses. The crowd's energy was infectious. Below in the mall, people were singing God Save the Queen and Rule Britannia with passion that seemed to surge upward toward the balcony. Union Jack flags waved frantically, creating a sea of red, white, and blue that stretched as far as the eye could see. For Prince Louis, this wasn't a formal ceremony. This was the most exciting party he had ever witnessed, and his body began to respond accordingly. It started subtly. While his family maintained their composed waving, Prince Louis began to bounce slightly on his toes. The music from the military bands below was providing a steady beat, and something about the rhythm seemed to speak directly to the young prince's natural sense of movement. Catherine noticed his increasing animation and gently placed a guiding hand on his shoulder, a motherly gesture that spoke to any parent who had ever tried to keep an excited child calm in a formal setting. But Prince Louis's energy was building, fed by the incredible atmosphere surrounding him. The combination of the crowd's cheers, the musical accompaniment, and the sheer excitement of being at the center of such a massive celebration was proving too stimulating for his 4-year-old nervous system to process quietly. His bouncing became more pronounced, and his waving took on an enthusiastic quality that was distinctly different from the measured gestures of his family members. The television cameras, initially focused on capturing formal shots of the entire royal family, began to notice the animated little figure in the sailor suit. Directors and broadcast trucks around the world started calling for closer shots of Prince Louis, recognizing that something special was developing. Social media users watching the live coverage were already beginning to comment on the young prince's obvious excitement, with many expressing delight at seeing such genuine joy during what was typically a very formal occasion. Then came the moment that would define the entire appearance. As the military band below reached a particularly rousing section of their performance, Prince Louis could no longer contain his response to the music. His arms began moving in rhythm, not in the traditional royal wave, but in the universal motion that every child makes when they hear a great beat. He started air drumming. The transformation was immediate and electric. One moment, Prince Louis was attempting to maintain royal protocol. The next, he had become a 4-year-old boy responding naturally to music that moved him. His arms moved with surprising coordination for someone so young, keeping perfect time with the drums and the military band below. His face lit up with pure joy, completely unconscious of the hundreds of cameras capturing every movement, focused only on the irresistible rhythm that seemed to demand his participation. Catherine's initial response was the instinctive one of any mother in a public setting, a gentle attempt to redirect her son's behavior back toward the expected protocol. She leaned down to speak quietly to Prince Louis, but the din from the crowd below made communication difficult, and his absorption in his impromptu drumming performance made him largely oblivious to her guidance. Prince William, standing nearby, found himself caught between his role as a future king who understood the importance of protocol and his role as a father who recognized the pure joy his son was experiencing. The slight smile that crossed his face suggested that, in that moment, the father in him was winning. This was not the behavior outlined in any royal manual, but it was authentically and beautifully human. Princess Charlotte, ever the responsible big sister, attempted to help manage the situation by gently tapping Prince Louis on the arm and demonstrating the proper waving technique. But her brother was in his own world, lost in the rhythm that seemed to connect him directly to the celebration happening below. His drumming became more elaborate, his entire body moving to the beat, his face glowing with the kind of happiness that is impossible to fake. The crowd's reaction was instantaneous and overwhelming. As word spread through the mall that the young prince was putting on an impromptu drumming performance, the cheers grew louder and more enthusiastic. People began pointing toward the balcony, some pulling out phones to capture the moment, others simply laughing with delight at the unexpected entertainment. The formal atmosphere of the Jubilee celebration was being transformed by a 4-year-old boy who had decided that the best way to honor his great-grandmother was through pure, joyful expression. Television commentators around the world struggled to maintain their professional composure as they described what was unfolding. This wasn't in any script or briefing they had received. Royal protocols didn't account for what to do when the youngest member of the family decided to turn a state ceremony into a spontaneous concert. Some tried to redirect attention back to the formal proceedings, but it was clear that Prince Louis had become the star of the show. The international media response was immediate and unprecedented. Within minutes, clips of Prince Louis's drumming performance were being shared across every social media platform. News outlets that had planned serious coverage of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee found themselves leading with stories about a 4-year-old's adorable antics. The hashtag Prince Louis began trending worldwide, with millions of people sharing videos, memes, and comments about the young prince's infectious enthusiasm. But perhaps the most telling moment came when Queen Elizabeth II herself became aware of her great-grandson's performance. Palace staff later revealed that despite the formal nature of the occasion, a slight smile had crossed the Queen's face when she noticed Prince Louis's drumming. For a woman who had spent 70 years maintaining perfect composure during thousands of public appearances, this small break in her formal demeanor spoke volumes about the effect her youngest great-grandson was having on even the most protocol-conscious members of the royal family. As the military band below continued to play, Prince Louis's performance evolved. He began incorporating different drumming techniques, sometimes using both hands in unison, other times alternating in complex rhythms that suggested he was hearing multiple instrumental parts in the music. His movements were natural and unself-conscious, displaying the kind of musical instinct that many professional musicians spend years trying to recapture, the ability to simply feel music and respond to it without overthinking or self-editing. The contrast between Prince Louis's uninhibited joy and the formal restraint of the rest of the royal family created a visual metaphor that resonated with viewers around the world. Here was tradition meeting spontaneity, protocol encountering pure human expression, and the result was magical. The young prince wasn't breaking rules maliciously or acting out for attention. He was simply being authentically himself in a moment of overwhelming joy, and that authenticity was proving more compelling than any carefully choreographed ceremony could be. As Prince Louis continued his impromptu drumming performance, The ripple effects of his spontaneous display were spreading far beyond the confines of Buckingham Palace balcony. Television directors worldwide were making split-second decisions to focus their coverage on this unexpected star of the Jubilee celebrations. In broadcasting control rooms from London to Tokyo, producers were abandoning their carefully planned shot sequences to capture every moment of the 4-year-old prince's joyful performance. The international audience was witnessing something unprecedented in modern royal history. While royal children had certainly had memorable moments during public appearances, from Prince William's shy waves to Prince Harry's mischievous grins, nothing quite compared to the sustained, uninhibited display that Prince Louis was providing. His drumming wasn't a brief moment of childish behavior to be quickly corrected. It was an extended performance that seemed to grow more confident and elaborate with each passing minute. Social media platforms were experiencing unprecedented activity related to royal coverage. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook were flooded with real-time posts about Prince Louis's performance. Users were creating memes, sharing video clips, and expressing genuine delight at seeing such authentic joy from a member of the royal family. The hashtag Prince Louis was joined by hashtag Royal Drummer, hashtag Jubilee Star, and dozens of other trending topics, all celebrating the young prince's musical moment. Meanwhile, on the balcony itself, the family dynamics were playing out in real time for the world to see. Catherine's maternal instincts were clearly torn between allowing her son to express his joy and maintaining the dignity expected at such a formal state occasion. Her attempts to gently guide Prince Louis back to traditional royal behavior were met with his complete absorption in his musical performance, creating a relatable scene that resonated with parents everywhere who had ever tried to manage an excited child in a public setting. Prince William's response revealed the complexity of his position as both a father and a future king. His body language showed a man caught between competing priorities, the need to maintain royal protocol, and the natural pride any father would feel watching his son bring such obvious joy to millions of people. The slight smile that occasionally crossed his face suggested that, despite any concerns about protocol, he was genuinely enjoying his son's performance. Princess Charlotte's role as the responsible older sister was on full display. At 7 years old, she seemed acutely aware of the proper behavior expected on the balcony, and her gentle attempts to guide her younger brother back to appropriate royal conduct showed both maturity beyond her years and genuine affection for Prince Louis. Her expressions ranged from mild concern to amused resignation as she watched her brother's performance unfold, occasionally glancing toward their parents as if seeking guidance on how to handle the situation. Prince George, as the eldest of the 3 children and heir to the throne after his father, maintained his composure throughout his brother's performance. At 8 years old, he had already begun to understand the weight of his future responsibilities, and his ability to continue waving appropriately while his younger brother drummed enthusiastically beside him showed remarkable maturity. Yet careful observers could detect moments when even George's serious demeanor was challenged by his brother's infectious enthusiasm. The crowd below had become increasingly engaged with Prince Louis's performance. What had started as traditional Jubilee cheering had evolved into something more interactive, with many people in the mall clapping along to the rhythm that the young prince was keeping. Some were calling out encouragement, others were laughing with delight, and many were simply standing in amazed appreciation of the unexpected entertainment they were receiving from the royal balcony. International news organizations were scrambling to adjust their coverage in real time. Correspondents who had prepared serious commentary about the Queen's 70-year reign and the significance of the Platinum Jubilee found themselves describing a 4-year-old's drumming technique and speculating about his musical future. The juxtaposition between the formal significance of the occasion and the wonderfully informal nature of Prince Louis's contribution created a narrative tension that made for compelling television. The performance reached new heights when Prince Louis began incorporating more complex movements. His air drumming evolved to include what appeared to be cymbal crashes, performed with theatrical arm sweeps that suggested he was hearing the full orchestral arrangement of the military band below. His facial expressions showed deep concentration mixed with pure joy, as if he was conducting a private concert that happened to have an audience of millions. Palace staff, watching from inside the building, were experiencing a range of emotions. Those responsible for protocol were undoubtedly concerned about the departure from planned procedures, but many were also charmed by Prince Louis's obvious happiness and the positive response it was generating. Senior palace officials, who had spent decades managing royal public appearances, found themselves in uncharted territory, watching as a 4-year-old essentially rewrote the rules of royal balcony behavior. The Queen herself, despite the formal nature of the occasion, seemed increasingly aware of her great-grandson's performance. While maintaining her position and continuing to acknowledge the crowd with appropriate waves, those close to her noted subtle changes in her demeanor. The slight relaxation in her posture and the almost imperceptible upturn at the corners of her mouth suggested that even the most protocol-conscious member of the family was being affected by Prince Louis's joyful display. Behind the scenes, royal protection officers were maintaining their vigilant watch, while also trying not to be distracted by the entertaining performance unfolding just feet away from them. Their professional training required constant alertness to potential security threats, but the infectious nature of Prince Louis's joy was challenging even their disciplined focus. Several were later seen smiling broadly in photographs taken during the event. The ripple effects of the performance were extending beyond immediate viewers. Television audiences around the world were calling friends and family members to tell them to turn on their televisions to witness the extraordinary royal moment unfolding. Social media engagement reached levels typically reserved for major sporting events or breaking news. But this time the cause was pure, innocent entertainment from an unexpected source. Media analysts were already beginning to discuss the long-term implications of Prince Louis's performance. Some saw it as a refreshing humanization of the royal family, a reminder that beneath the titles and traditions were real people with authentic emotions and behaviors. Others worried about the precedent being set for future royal appearances, questioning whether such spontaneous behavior might undermine the dignity traditionally associated with the monarchy. Child development experts watching the coverage were quick to point out that Prince Louis's behavior was completely normal and healthy for a 4-year-old in such a stimulating environment. His ability to hear music and respond to it physically, his unconscious relationship to rhythm and movement, and his complete lack of self-consciousness were all signs of a child developing naturally and joyfully. Rather than being concerned about his behavior, these experts suggested that his response should be celebrated as an example of authentic child development in action. As the performance continued, Prince Louis seemed to become even more confident in his musical expression. His movements became bolder, his rhythms more complex, and his joy more evident. What had started as a spontaneous response to music had evolved into a full-fledged performance, complete with dramatic flourishes and moments of intense concentration that suggested he was taking his impromptu role as royal drummer very seriously indeed. The international coverage was creating a global moment of shared joy. In an era often dominated by negative news and divisive politics, Prince Louis's innocent, uninhibited celebration was providing millions of people with a reason to smile. Comments from viewers around the world expressed gratitude for the unexpected happiness his performance was bringing to their day, with many noting how his authentic joy was a welcome contrast to the often rehearsed nature of public appearances by political and cultural figures. As the RAF flyover approached, the culminating moment of the entire Platinum Jubilee balcony ceremony, Prince Louis's drumming performance was reaching its own crescendo. The sound of approaching aircraft could be heard in the distance, a low rumble that would soon explode into the thunderous roar of military jets passing overhead in perfect formation. For the royal family, this represented the climactic moment they had all been preparing for. The instant when they would look skyward in coordinated appreciation of the aerial tribute to the Queen's 7 decades of service. Prince Louis, however, was operating on an entirely different wavelength. The approaching aircraft sound seemed to energize him further, as if the rumbling engines provided an even richer musical backdrop for his continued drumming performance. His movements became more animated, his air drumming more elaborate, and his joy more infectious than ever. The 4-year-old had essentially transformed the most formal moment of the Jubilee celebration into his personal musical spectacular. Catherine's maternal instincts reached a critical point as the flyover approached. Understanding the significance of the moment and the importance of having the family present a unified appearance for what would become the defining photograph of the entire celebration, she made several gentle attempts to redirect Prince Louis's attention toward the sky. Her approach was masterful in its subtlety, never harsh or embarrassing, but clearly intended to guide her son back toward appropriate royal behavior for the climactic moment. The tension between spontaneous joy and royal protocol reached its peak in these final moments before the flyover. Television cameras captured every nuance of the family's interaction with Prince Louis, from Catherine's gentle guidance to William's protective stance, from Charlotte's sisterly concern to George's steadfast maintenance of proper behavior, despite the chaos unfolding beside him. The world was witnessing, in real time, how a modern royal family navigated the challenge of balancing authentic human behavior with the demands of public duty. Prince Louis's response to his mother's guidance revealed the delightful stubbornness that many 4-year-olds possess when they are thoroughly engaged in an activity they love. While he wasn't defiant or disrespectful, he was clearly reluctant to abandon his musical performance just as it was reaching what he perceived to be its most exciting moments. His continued drumming, even as Catherine spoke softly to him, demonstrated the kind of focused concentration that children display when they are truly absorbed in creative expression. The crowd below had become increasingly invested in Prince Louis's performance, with many people now actively encouraging his drumming through their cheers and applause. What had begun as traditional Jubilee celebration had evolved into something more interactive and personal, with hundreds of thousands of people feeling a direct connection to the young prince's obvious joy. Some members of the crowd were now clapping in rhythm with his drumming, creating an extraordinary moment of synchronization between the royal balcony and the masses gathered below. As the aircraft became visible in the distance, flying in perfect formation toward Buckingham Palace, the moment arrived for the entire royal family to look skyward in the traditional gesture of acknowledgement and appreciation. This was the money shot that photographers and television producers had been waiting for, the image that would grace newspaper front pages and magazine covers around the world, capturing 4 generations of the royal family sharing in a moment of national celebration. The challenge was that Prince Louis seemed largely unaware of the approaching aircraft, his attention still completely absorbed by his drumming performance. The contrast between his earthbound musical focus and the skybound spectacle approaching overhead created a perfect metaphor for the tension between individual expression and collective responsibility that defines so many aspects of royal life. Catherine's final intervention came at precisely the right moment. With the aircraft now clearly visible and the roar of their engines beginning to dominate the audio landscape, she managed to gently but firmly guide Prince Louis's attention upward. The transition was remarkable. One moment he was lost in his musical world, and the next he was looking skyward with the same wide-eyed wonder that had characterized his entire balcony experience. The sight of the RAF aircraft flying in formation seemed to capture Prince Louis's imagination in an entirely new way. His drumming ceased as his attention shifted to this new source of excitement, his face lighting up with fresh amazement at the spectacle unfolding above. The aircraft, flying in perfect precision overhead, created a thunderous sound that seemed to satisfy his need for musical stimulation while simultaneously providing the visual drama that the formal occasion required. The photograph that captured the royal family looking skyward during the flyover would become one of the most memorable images of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. Prince Louis, standing between his siblings with his face turned upward in wonder, represented the perfect synthesis of childlike amazement and royal participation. His expression captured the awe that many in the crowd below were feeling, serving as a reminder that the most formal occasions can still inspire genuine wonder and excitement. The aftermath of the flyover brought a moment of relative calm to the balcony proceedings. As the aircraft disappeared into the distance, and the crowd's cheers reached new heights of enthusiasm, Prince Louis seemed to settle into a more traditional royal mode, though his energy levels remained noticeably higher than those of his siblings. The combination of his extended drumming performance and the dramatic conclusion provided by the flyover appeared to have satisfied his need for stimulation and musical expression. The final moments of the balcony appearance showcased the royal family's remarkable ability to recover their composure and maintain their dignity despite the unconventional performance that had dominated much of the ceremony. Prince Louis, while still noticeably more animated than protocol typically allowed, managed to join his family in the traditional waving that marked the conclusion of their public appearance. His waves were enthusiastic and genuine, reflecting the joy he had experienced throughout the entire event. Catherine's relief was visible as the family prepared to retreat into the palace, having successfully navigated what had certainly been one of the most challenging royal balcony appearances in recent memory. Her handling of Prince Louis's exuberant behavior had been masterful, striking the perfect balance between allowing her son to express his natural joy while ultimately ensuring that the formal requirements of the occasion were met. Her approach provided a template for how modern royal parents might handle similar situations in the future. As the family began to wave their final goodbyes to the crowd, Prince Louis delivered one last surprise. Instead of the formal royal wave that his siblings were executing with practiced precision, he offered the crowd a series of enthusiastic gestures that seemed to encapsulate his entire balcony experience. Part wave, part drumming motion, part celebration of the incredible day he had just experienced. It was a perfect ending to a performance that had redefined what royal balcony behavior could be. The crowd's response to the family's departure was extraordinary, with sustained cheering that seemed to acknowledge not just the formal success of the Jubilee celebration, but also the unexpected entertainment they had received from the youngest member of the royal family. Many people in the mall were already discussing Prince Louis's performance, sharing videos they had captured on their phones, and expressing amazement at what they had just witnessed. As the palace doors closed behind the royal family, ending the public portion of the Platinum Jubilee balcony ceremony, it was clear that something unprecedented had just occurred. Prince Louis had single-handedly transformed one of the most formal and tradition-bound royal ceremonies into a celebration of authentic human joy and expression. His performance would be remembered long after the specific details of the Queen's milestone celebration had faded from memory, serving as a reminder that sometimes the most meaningful moments of connection between the royal family and their subjects come not from perfect adherence to protocol, but from genuine displays of human emotion and authenticity. Within minutes of the royal family retreating into Buckingham Palace, Prince Louis's balcony performance had begun its transformation into a global cultural phenomenon. Social media platforms were experiencing unprecedented traffic related to royal coverage, with millions of users sharing clips, creating memes, and expressing their delight at the unexpected entertainment they had received. The 4-year-old prince had accomplished something that the most sophisticated marketing campaigns struggled to achieve. He had created a moment of genuine, universal joy that transcended cultural, political, and geographical boundaries. News organizations around the world found themselves in the unusual position of leading their coverage of a significant state occasion with stories about a child's adorable behavior. The Associated Press, Reuters, BBC, CNN, and countless other major news outlets were forced to adjust their carefully planned Jubilee coverage to focus on what had clearly become the day's most compelling story. Editorial meetings in newsrooms from New York to Tokyo were revolving around questions about how to balance serious coverage of the Queen's historic milestone with the irresistible human interest story that Prince Louis had created. The immediate family response to Prince Louis's performance revealed much about the modern royal family's approach to public life and child-rearing. Palace sources later revealed that rather than being upset or embarrassed by their youngest son's unconventional behavior, Prince William and Catherine were primarily concerned with ensuring that he had enjoyed the experience and felt comfortable with his public role. Their approach reflected a modern parenting philosophy that prioritizes children's emotional well-being and authentic expression over rigid adherence to formal expectations. Behind the palace walls, Prince Louis himself seemed largely unaware of the international sensation he had created. For him, the balcony appearance had simply been an exciting adventure filled with music, crowds, and airplanes, exactly the kind of stimulating experience that any 4-year-old would find thrilling. His inability to comprehend the global impact of his performance was perhaps the most endearing aspect of the entire episode, highlighting the pure innocence and authenticity that had made his behavior so compelling to audiences worldwide. The Queen's personal response to her great-grandson's performance became a subject of intense speculation and interest. Palace insiders suggested that, contrary to what some might expect, Her Majesty had been charmed rather than concerned by Prince Louis's musical display. Having raised 4 children of her own and witnessed countless royal children navigate the challenges of public life, the Queen reportedly understood that such moments of spontaneous behavior were natural and even healthy for young royals learning to balance their public duties with their personal development. International child development experts and educational psychologists were quick to praise Prince Louis's behavior as exemplary for his age group. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a leading expert in child psychology at Cambridge University, noted that the young prince's response to music and rhythm demonstrated excellent neurological development and creative expression. His ability to maintain sustained focus on his drumming performance while surrounded by overwhelming stimulation showed remarkable concentration skills and musical intelligence that spoke to his healthy cognitive development. The meme culture surrounding Prince Louis's performance exploded across social media platforms with unprecedented creativity and enthusiasm. Users created animated GIFs of his drumming sequences, set his movements to various musical tracks, and developed countless variations on themes of childhood joy and authentic expression. The hashtag Prince Louis became not just a trending topic, but a cultural shorthand for moments of pure, uninhibited happiness that resonated with people regardless of their feelings about the monarchy or British politics. Television comedy shows around the world found rich material in Prince Louis's performance, but notably, most of the humor was affectionate rather than mocking. Late-night hosts from Saturday Night Live to The Graham Norton Show created sketches celebrating the young prince's joy rather than ridiculing his breach of protocol. This positive response reflected the universal appeal of his performance and the genuine warmth it had generated among viewers who saw his behavior as refreshingly authentic rather than inappropriately disruptive. The long-term implications of Prince Louis's balcony performance began to emerge as royal commentators and constitutional experts discussed what his behavior might mean for the future of the monarchy. Some suggested that his uninhibited joy represented exactly the kind of authentic human connection that the royal family needed to maintain relevance with younger generations. Others noted that his performance had generated more positive publicity for the monarchy than years of carefully orchestrated public relations campaigns. Educational institutions began incorporating Prince Louis's performance into discussions about child development, creativity, and the importance of allowing children to express themselves authentically even in formal settings. Teachers around the world used video clips of his drumming to illustrate lessons about music, rhythm, and the natural ways that children respond to stimulating environments. His behavior became a case study in healthy child development and creative expression, The international music community also took notice of Prince Louis's performance, with several prominent musicians and educators commenting on his natural rhythm and obvious musical instincts. Some noted that his ability to maintain complex rhythmic patterns while surrounded by distracting stimulation suggested genuine musical talent that might be worth nurturing. Music teachers began using his performance as an example of how children naturally respond to rhythm and melody when they feel free to express themselves without self-consciousness. Commercial implications of Prince Louis's popularity became evident as toy companies reported increased interest in children's drums and musical instruments. The sailor suit he wore during the performance became a sought-after fashion item for young children, and several manufacturers began producing replicas. However, palace officials were careful to ensure that the young prince's image and likeness were not exploited commercially, maintaining appropriate boundaries around the family's privacy and the children's welfare. The psychological impact of Prince Louis's performance on the British public during a time of economic uncertainty and political division was significant and measurable. Polling conducted in the weeks following the Jubilee celebration showed marked increases in positive feelings about the royal family, with many respondents specifically citing the young prince's joyful behavior as a factor in their improved attitudes. His performance served as a reminder of the monarchy's human dimension during a period when many institutions were facing public skepticism. International diplomatic circles also took notice of the global positive response to Prince Louis's performance, recognizing it as a significant soft power asset for the United Kingdom. Cultural attaches and diplomatic officials noted that the young prince had generated more positive international coverage in a single afternoon than many official diplomatic initiatives achieved in months of careful planning. His authentic joy had become an inadvertent but highly effective form of cultural diplomacy. The precedent set by Prince Louis's balcony performance began influencing how other royal families around the world approach public appearances with their children. European royal houses noted the positive response to authentic child behavior and began allowing their own young family members more freedom to express themselves naturally during formal occasions. The Spanish, Swedish, and Dutch royal families all reported being influenced by the British example when planning their own family public appearances. As months passed after the Jubilee celebration, Prince Louis's drumming performance continued to generate discussion and analysis. Academic papers were written about its cultural significance. Documentary filmmakers included it in productions about modern monarchy, and historians began placing it in the context of other memorable royal moments that had shaped public perceptions of the institution. The performance had achieved something rare in royal history. It had created a moment that was simultaneously deeply formal and completely informal, traditionally royal yet utterly human. The lasting legacy of Prince Louis's balcony performance extended far beyond the immediate entertainment it provided. It served as a powerful reminder that authenticity and joy can be more compelling than perfect adherence to protocol, that children's natural responses to stimulating environments should be celebrated rather than suppressed, and that some of the most memorable moments in public life come not from carefully orchestrated ceremonies, but from spontaneous expressions of genuine human emotion. For Prince Louis himself, the balcony performance became a defining moment that would likely influence how he approached his future royal duties. The overwhelmingly positive response to his authentic behavior sent a message that being genuinely himself, even in formal settings, was not only acceptable but appreciated by the public he would someday serve. His drumming had inadvertently taught him, and the watching world, that there was room within royal tradition for personal expression, creative joy, and the kind of uninhibited happiness that makes constitutional monarchy feel more like an extended family celebration than a distant institutional ritual. The story of Prince Louis rocking the palace balcony with his drumming had become more than just a charming anecdote about royal children behaving like children. It had evolved into a cultural touchstone that represented the possibility of balancing tradition with authenticity, formality with joy, and institutional responsibility with individual expression. In transforming one of Britain's most formal ceremonies into a celebration of pure, innocent happiness, the 4-year-old prince had reminded millions of people around the world why moments of genuine joy are so precious and powerful, regardless of the setting in which they occur.